These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs.
Tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal Television for Agricultural Business Decisions is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you for joining us today on Market Journal. As always, the team's been busy over the past week, and we've got plenty of material to get through as part of our time together. With much of Nebraska finally seeing some meaningful rainfall, it might be time to start preparing for mitigation strategies for fungal diseases in some soybean fields. Eric Hunt, speaking of weather, he's on standby with your weekly weather forecast. And Elliot Dennis, he'll be joining us a little bit later in the broadcast to discuss the latest trends in the cattle markets. Plus, what's new at Reinke Manufacturing and what will they innovate next? We'll get to the answer to those questions coming up in a little bit, but let's start things off this week with a Conservation Corner. Since 2020, the Panhandle Research, Extension, and Education Center has successfully operated a web-based dashboard to support the Peer Learning Agricultural Network, also known as PLAN. This platform has enabled growers to access critical data, and now that data can be accessed anytime, anywhere with the Plan Mobile Irrigation app.
The purpose of this network was trying to get technology to growers' hands. So one, increase adoption rate of technologies. And then second is trying to create this network where we can work closely with growers. It creates a network, so allows for testing research questions or developing research questions, getting extension work done, and also provide an open field for education opportunities. And then naturally allows us to work with industry partners because we're bringing these different industry solutions to growers' fields. So we'll help grow the certain industry a little bit. And then fourth is it creates this data rich real farm data, which will be really useful for AI or future research question developments. What we're trying to do is bring different pieces together in a centralized network. We don't often call that plant data. It's actually all data from different commercial partners or some of the sensors we develop ourselves. Our goal really is the data is important because it is being used by the people who need it. So that's really the goal of this. I think before a lot of times people heard about it, but they didn't have a chance to try that. So what we're trying to do is getting those data effectively to growers' hands and also providing effective means to help them explain the data, make sure the data is useful, can help them in certain decision-making process. So the one we're focusing a lot on is, at least for right now, is irrigation management. How can we help grower better manage water? If grower, they're using this app, and with the technologies we're trying to bring to the app along with our industry partners, I think they will have better ideas where their soil water level is at in their field. And then we can also help them to check, make sure that data is good. So overall, they get better awareness of their efficiency of their water application, their crop water needs, and overall, they have all the tools and knowledge and information so they're ready to make a better information if it needs to be. We're bringing some trusted information, like we're using some of the high accuracy data from Nebraska Mesonet And then also we're trying to, bring in industry partners. And overall, we're needing all these data materials to something growers can use. There are some similar products on the market as well from industry companies. I think our uniqueness is the app itself is free, and we're providing some pretty good information, and we're constantly checking and make sure that data is good quality and providing good information. It also offers that, if they're not ready to make a purchase through certain technologies through this app, they will have a way to try and see some of what it looks like without even needing to spend some upfront cost. So I guess it's a little bit of both for growers that is ready to pay for technology, and also for grower probably just want to try and see how everything goes.
Sounds like a great tool for producers all around the state. Now, if you'd like to give the Plan Mobile app a try this growing season, we provided a link along with this story on the Market Journal homepage where you can download that app free of charge. Just head over to marketjournal.unl.edu. We move along now. Over the past few weeks, we've brought you some great looks behind the scenes of Reinke Manufacturing in Deshler. We've learned how robotics are playing a pretty important role around their operation, and how the company's continued involvement in community outreach is building their local workforce. This week on the show, we're going to be getting a third and final story out of that series as we learn about some of the latest products that Reinke has to offer and how they're hoping to continue innovating irrigation into the future. Nebraska is the leading state when it comes to center pivot irrigation. There are a number of manufacturers that make pivots here in the Cornhusker state. Why do farmers continue to choose Reinke?
They choose us because, like we talked about before, our design criteria. Simple. It's a very simple design. It's rugged. It lasts a very, very long time. We've got a great dealer network. We've got 30 or so dealers across the state of Nebraska. They're all fantastic. They are very well trained. We provide good training to them, factory training for them, so they know what they're doing. And we're innovative. I mean, we're coming out, we've talked about this, we've come out with 3 new products just this last year, which are all very innovative. And I think that with the growers, when they start seeing those and understanding it better, they're going to be very pleased with those innovations we've come out with.
It's one thing to serve Nebraska, the entire U.S., but then when you became a worldwide company, as I mentioned, you guys are 60, 70 different countries now. Yes. Worldwide. What's the biggest challenge to scaling a company like that?
Scale it's one of those things where obviously you have to have some facilities, because if you're shipping internationally, it's a different facility really than what if you're shipping domestically, because you have to get it containerized into a 40-foot container and those kind of things. You also have to develop some skills. You have to get the paperwork just right, or else it's not going to make the trip to the other side. So you got to do some training on that. And I think it's just, you just build on it. So like if the irrigation system that goes overseas is the same irrigation system that might get sold to somebody in Idaho. So building it is just scaling it up and getting more equipment, and getting more people. That's how you scale it. And you just got to make common sense investments in what you're doing. Mm-hmm.
What else would you like to share with us I haven't asked you about yet?
Well, certainly I want to talk about E3 at some point.
Yeah.
Right? So E3 is our brand new pivot model. We've had E2 for 20 years or so. Been a great product. It's a very good product. But as things go on, you think about things that you want to improve and do a little bit differently. So, when we start thinking about water application and water uniformity and precision agriculture, one of the challenges that center pivots has is spacing of the outlets. So if you think about on a span and you're coming over the span and you got to cross the tower. The tower is always a challenge because of the outlet spacing on the sprinklers. That's a big deal. And so what ends up happening is the outlets get a little bit closer as you go through the tower. Well, you can adjust your sprinklers, the outlet sizes, you can adjust those. But you still have a tendency to overwater over the towers, which creates rutting problems. That's the last place you want to overwater, is right where the tires are going, because it's just going to rut. And so what we've been able to do is create sequential spacing over the towers and across the spans, and over the towers, so that from the pivot center to the end of the swing arm corner or the end of the end boom or whatever the end of the irrigation system is, it's exactly all the way across, which hugely improves the water uniformity and the application rates. We can show through the USDA's program that they use for CPED, which is the acronym. I don't even know what CPED stands for, but that's what they use to show the water uniformity. We're vastly better than we were before and better than what everybody else has. So lots of benefits to that. I think two primary ones that we'd like to talk about is obviously the water uniformity, so that in your soil profile, you don't have spots where it's a little drier here and a little wetter here. It should be the same all the way through, all the way from one end of the system to the other. It's also helpful for chemical application. So when you're going out and putting your anhydrous on, now where your water filtration is and what your chemicals are, how they're infiltrating, you're getting more precise because it's from one end to the other, it's staying the same. So your nitrogen should be consistent across your whole field. So there's lots of really good benefits to that.
Thanks to the team there at Reinke for giving us the VIP treatment and showing us around their operation. We certainly look forward to seeing what they develop in the future. Well, up next, it's our time to turn our attention over to the markets. And last week, the U.S. Department of Agriculture released the latest cattle on feed report. It indicated a 2% decline in the total number of cattle and calves on feed in feedlots with a capacity of 1,000 head or more. That totaled 11.4 million head as of May 1st, and that 2% decline was compared to the same time last year. Joining us on Market Journal to break down that report as well as some latest news in the cattle industry is UNL livestock economist Elliot Dennis. Here's our conversation from Wednesday afternoon. We're going to talk to cattle markets, and we can't do so this week without talking about what was a rumor ended up being false reporting around New World Screwworm. There's a lot of concern about this right now, a lot of news around this topic. My question to you is, bring us up to speed with why there's so much concern around New World Screwworm. We've got the border closed to live cattle imports, and I guess the question is, domestically, if we do have New World Screwworm, what kind of an impact does it have?
Yeah, really. So the rumor was that we had New World Screwworm in the United States. It ended up being false. It was taken down, but it really sent the market into kind of a frenzy on, what was going to happen, what was the impacts. But, we've been kind of battling this for, really 18 months. It's slowly moving up from Panama all the way now into Mexico. And really the concern now is that it's really kind of breached this kind of narrow neck where it's pretty easy to have containment, and we're starting to break out into that. Makes it much harder to control. So a lot of the conversation has really shifted to if we have New World Screwworm and the impact, and really anticipating when. A lot of the prevention measures are not really working. That's why the border has been shut down, just as kind of precautionary. That doesn't mean that we won't have to worry about kind of like feral cattle or, cutting barbed wire and cattle running across. So that's still a concern. So even if we don't have legalized border crossings for cattle, we still have other concerns that we need to worry about. Really, ERS came out with a report about looking at what New World Screwworm was in the 20s and then ultimately in the 70s and kind of the impact. Just for Texas, we're looking at somewhere in the range of $1.8 billion on the economy at large. So it's not a small number. And then we think about kind of how that affects kind of production throughout the year. It has impacts, and people have been around longer than I have, tell you that, we change kind of the ways that we kind of manage cattle and when we harvest them and how we inspect. And so it's really not just going to affect the border states, but it's going to affect really the industry at large until we get a control over it.
We'll certainly keep an eye on that story as it develops. Hopefully it does not develop, but we'll certainly track it. Last week, the cattle on feed report come out. In particular, you highlighted the weight of cattle being placed caught your attention. What do you mean?
Yeah, so we've just kind of seen this continued trend in Nebraska to really place cattle heavier. When we look at kind of where the 900 plus cattle are at, we have a lot, is 15 to 20% of all of the cattle that we're placing are heavyweights. Really just kind of shows that the industry, particularly in Nebraska, has really evolved from, bringing in, 700 pound, steers or heifers and raising them to, 1,500 pounds, and really trying to work with these backgrounding yards that really clean up the cattle, get them bunk broke, and really place them at heavier weights. And so when we're seeing this kind of heavier weights, it's really a shift in the industry of our preference for cattle and where they're coming, and why I think we're seeing a lot of good performance on at the finishing.
When it comes to the cattle markets right now, seeing pretty strong numbers, some profitability out there in the industry, and that's obviously because of the size of the U.S. cattle herd being at record low levels. And the question always comes, when will we start to retain some heifers? Looks like we might slowly be doing so. Have you found any metrics to be able to track that?
Yeah, really the two metrics that we really look at is the total number of heifers going through our sale barns, and the second is the total number of heifers being placed into feed yards, and then we can track them at the end, which is cattle slaughter. Those are kind of three kind of points. When we look at kind of the cattle on feed report, look at heifers as a percentage of total cattle on feed, we're down about 37% of total percentage of cattle that are out there that are heifers. That's down from where we were at, 38, almost 39%, about a year and a half ago. And we've just kind of continually brought that number down. So there's some indication at least that some people are retaining, and we've kind of turned over the herd a little bit. So heifer retention is happening. It's maybe at a slower rate than we would have anticipated, but definitely has implications for total feeder cattle supply going to auction this fall, and total herd growth into 2026 and 27.
The condition of pastures was a pretty big conversation here in Nebraska, but well beyond across the plains as we look at, will there be grazing space for some of those heifers to be able to retain? I'm sure watching the drought monitor gives you a week-to-week look at how some of those are greening up here across the plains.
Yeah, I think in the early part we had some pretty significant concerns that we weren't going to have the rain, and really kind of when we get the rain really determines on kind of that crop condition. We're thinking about cool season versus warm season grass. We're thinking about kind of all that spring precipitation. Agronomists will tell you that has a lot to do with kind of our warm season grasses. All that spring or cool season grass that we had was that precipitation that we received last fall. So that was where some of that concern was going in the drought. But really things have kind of improved. And so there's not a huge concern in my mind that we're not going to have grass out there. It's just how long we're going to have the grazing season till. And then really I'm going to be looking at the July just to say, are we early weaning? Are we going to start, culling out a little bit early of our herd and kind of see what that dynamic turns out to be.
All right, finally, here we are. It's the grilling season after Memorial Day. A lot of speculation and dramatization of the summer grilling season is out there. What are you watching right now, seasonal trends for the cattle markets?
Yeah, I'm really looking at, how is beef demand going to hold up during this summer? So we've had a lot of uncertainty in the first half of the year of what the economy is going to do. We had a pretty cloudy, rainy day for us, and so a lot of people weren't out, grilling as much as they probably would have been. So beef demand is why we've had high cattle prices, and so if consumers continue to kind of, put their dollar where their mouth is, then we'll continue to have strong prices. If we start to, stumble a little bit, we can see those prices ratchet down pretty quickly. So a lot of downside in the market where I'm seeing just because everything's riding on beef demand. So if we're thinking about kind of ways to manage price, finding places to lock in profitability is definitely a go-to strategy for this summer.
My thanks to Elliot for joining us on the set here at Market Journal this week. Want to let you know that coming up next week, we'll be joined by Darren Newsome. He's always a fan favorite, so if you've got a question specifically about the grain markets for me to ask Darren, go ahead and email us or get in touch on social media, and I will pass your question right along. It can be easy to find oneself in a heated argument about agriculture, especially in today's digital world. Ultimately, how those in agriculture handle sensitive conversations with individuals outside of the industry can greatly affect their understanding and acceptance of farmers and ranchers and their own food on the table. You can learn how to communicate with those outside of agriculture in the latest issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It is now time for a check of weather with Nebraska Extension's Eric Hunt. Eric, over the past week finally saw some spring precipitation around the state. How is soil moisture profiles looking now as you look across the state? We had some good showers, as I mentioned, and what are you keeping an eye on as we turn to the week ahead?
Well, thanks, Bryce. We definitely saw some improvements in soil moisture across the western portion of the state, which is very welcome. If you were involved in a crop share lease and are interested in filling out a survey, this would be greatly appreciated by folks in Extension. Go.unl.edu/2025 crop share, or you can use this QR code here at this postcard. Weather, we do have some warmer temperatures coming this weekend, and that will actually be welcome news. We've been relatively cool here for the last 10 days to 2 weeks. So we could use some heat on the crops. It's coming this weekend, highs in the 80s statewide, both Saturday and Sunday. Maybe a little chance of showers central and eastern sections of the state on Saturday afternoon. Otherwise, I think we got a dry couple of days coming up here. Warm temperatures, probably maybe getting close to 90 degrees on Monday here across the eastern section of the state. Relatively breezy conditions, but I think with the recent precipitation, fire danger should be a little bit lower than it has been earlier this spring. By late Monday, though, the main storm system of interest will be moving into our region, and with the surface high being in place here over the southeast, we're going to have a good fetch of moisture coming up from the south. And I think by late Monday, we should see storms developing across the High Plains region, including the Panhandle, as we work their way toward the east overnight Monday and into eastern sections of the state on Tuesday morning into later Tuesday. Chances of severe weather western side of the state on Monday afternoon and Monday evening, working its way toward the east during the day on Tuesday. Precipitation, right now, the projections are best for an inch plus across the Panhandle, and I think there's definitely going to be a chance of picking up an inch or more across the eastern section of the state. Southwestern Nebraska, this may be a little bit better than what's currently projected, but I think there's an area of the state that may miss out really this next week. You're probably the one. The big wild card later this next week will be what happens with remnants of Alvin, so that some of that moisture may have some influence on how much precipitation we get earlier in the week. And then it's possible that we may get another trough that's come into this portion of the country by Tuesday or Thursday and then maybe into Friday. And if that happens, there's going to be a chance of getting some additional precipitation, particularly the eastern half of the state and getting into Iowa and Illinois. And the CPC does have a good portion of the state is in the moderate risk for heavy precipitation this next Thursday. So something to watch out for, but it's also possible that if that doesn't come to fruition or if it ends up sliding to our south, we may be relatively dry here later in the week. So just pay attention to the forecast as you get closer to next Tuesday and Wednesday. In terms of later next week, I think we should cool off after that cold front blasts through on Tuesday, probably warming up a little bit more later in the week. It does appear another cold front will be moving in next weekend that will probably bring more chances of precipitation statewide. I also think it's going to bring down our temperatures. So we may actually be a little bit cooler than what's currently projected here through about June 9th through 11th, for example. CPC also shows at least a chance of having above average precipitation. Some of that will probably depend on that trough. And I also think there's going to be chances of getting another half inch, maybe an inch of rain across central and eastern sections of the state as we head into next weekend. Precipitation recently through Wednesday morning, very good precipitation last weekend across the western section of the state. Some okay precipitation amounts here across eastern Nebraska. A lot of this came kind of nice. Unfortunately, southwestern Nebraska missed out until Wednesday, so we did get some better precipitation down here, which is badly needed. We've been mostly missing out of this part of the state here so far this spring, and this area of the state did go into severe drought. A lot of improvement though across other parts of western Nebraska. A little bit of degradation down here around Hebron and Fairbury. Soil moisture percentiles very wet here across the south. Much improved here across western Nebraska. Still some very dry soils though across portions of central Nebraska. Soil temperatures are mostly in the 50s, low 60s. And precip roundup for May 25th, 2025. Back to you, Bryce.
Thanks for that update, Eric. And finally today, with the extra precipitation we did see across the state over the past couple of weeks, soybean producers may want to be extra vigilant for the potential of fungal diseases among emerging plants. Market Journal's Bill Dodd recently caught up with an extension plant pathologist to learn what we should be looking out for.
With soybean plants emerging around Nebraska, mitigating plant disease over the coming months will be challenging as always. During this time, it will be of vital importance for producers to keep an eye on any areas of a planted field where plants don't seem to be emerging.
When you see those, it could be many different things. You could have planter issues, you could have weather issues, you could actually have a disease issue as well, though, that could be impacting why those didn't come up. And there's several different diseases that are impacting seedlings this time of year. And they're doing this because that's the most susceptible time for a soybean plant. It's a big struggle to start off as a seed and get through that soil alone, let alone when there's not disease present. So some of those diseases will get the seedlings at that time and kill them off, and you'll have what's called pre-emergence damping off, where they just never will emerge. Or if you get out there quick enough and you see those spaces, you might also find a small seedling there that had just died, and that's post-emergence damping off. And the diseases that cause that are Pythium, Fusarium, Rhizoctonia, and Phytophthora. So all of those could be showing up this time of year. And if you have large enough areas where your stand is impacted, you could have significant issues where those beans aren't able to compensate.
Many soybean diseases will thrive in wet conditions. And while most of Nebraska has been through extended drought conditions, many producers have the capability to utilize irrigation options. However, under the right conditions, Irrigation can promote fungal disease as well.
A lot of times disease comes with water. So we can end up in a situation where we don't have diseases we expect, but because Nebraska has that unique irrigation capacity on such a large scale, we'll see that growers can put on water and make up for that lack of drought. In some cases, irrigation amounts of water don't really fall like rain amounts do. So we're putting on less water more often, and that can create even more disease problems. So as these beans start to develop and as we get into a more foliar disease season, we can kind of fuel some of those with increased irrigation. White mold is one concern. It's been a big issue in 2021, 2023. We're anticipating as a lot of those fields go back into beans this year, we're going to see more white mold this year. So if we do get into a situation where it's dry and continued dry weather, think about how you're applying that water during flowering specifically. That's when the plants are most susceptible to white mold. And if we're applying frequently and at low amounts, that can cause that situation where the white mold really spreads rapidly.
Given current soybean prices, producers will need to be confident in the disease mitigation strategies they tend to employ over the growing season to ensure that they're getting the best return on investment for every dollar spent.
Well, it becomes more difficult with soybean prices like they are. You got to think a little bit more about which management applications are going to be most effective. So definitely consider your field history. White mold specifically, if you haven't had a strong history of white mold in that field, it's not likely to show up and be bad in the first season. Target that money where it's going to make the biggest difference as you go into the next season. So it pays to figure out what that disease is that you're having so you can target management specifically for it. The best way to do that in Nebraska is send plants into the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. It's a great value for figuring out what you have. Prices for diagnostics start around $20 a sample. So if you're getting ready to spend thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on management, make sure you know which disease you're managing for to make sure that investment is worth it.
As the growing season continues to progress and Mother Nature throws the inevitable curveball or two in relation to the weather, keeping an eye on our soybean stands will be an instrumental step in keeping your fields in good health. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks for that information, Bill. And if you'd like to keep up with the latest disease detection around the state, be sure to bookmark cropwatch.unl.edu on your web browser. Well, that is about all the time we have for this week's show. I want to let you know that if you did miss one of our stories, we invite you to follow the Market Journal team on social media, as well as invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can join in on the conversation. We hope to see you right back here next time. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.